Welcome back to Ambivalent Offenders. This is Jamie.
This is Erin.
Wow, this has been a week. We've been recording a lot. I think the last 2 days, two or 3 days.
Two. I think this is the third.
Third, I know. Wow, it's a lot for us.
What is time?
Well, yeah, history. Lots of history, lots of hours talking about history, but lots of fun though too.
Yep.
Although I think on the last one, I was kind of losing it. I mean, my Queer Eye, Thomas Cromwell reality show, Fixer idea was a little out there, but
look for it when you guys listen to that one, which hopefully you are going to be soon.
Yep, Jane Boleyn, part 2, the final one. And this is the final one.
Yeah, Bonnie.
Bonnie. Yep. So before we jump back into part 3 of Bonnie, the final part, just wanted to make a few notes. As I said, housekeeping. I remember from last one. I remember.
Front of the house.
Front of the house. Yeah. It's in front of the house business.
That's an inside joke. I don't think it's in the actual podcast.
Do we take it out? Oh, okay. I couldn't remember the name for housekeeping and I called it front of the house. So now you're in on the inside joke. As always, check our Instagram. Erin has been killing it, and she'll be, hopefully when you listen to this, you've either already listened to the last Jane Boleyn one or you've seen her amazing posts for it. I'm really excited to see them in action.
There's going to be a handful of them for Jane Part 2, so be on the lookout on Instagram.
Yeah, I had some requests. And she fulfilled them.
I did.
As always. And I'm going to be deciding here, as I said, if you listen to the Jane episode on my figure, just to remind you, in case you haven't listened to that one yet or couldn't remember, it's down to Yoko Ono and P.T. Barnum. If you want to have a choice in that choice, then go onto our Patreon. You can join at one of those 2 levels, $3 a month. Or $5 a month, and you get more content from us. Remember, this Bonnie Parker 3-parter is actually a gift to you from our weird week where we had all those problems. Mother Nature, my voice.
A really big gift, considering we didn't even know it was going to be a 3-parter.
Nope, did not know. If you haven't, follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, then you know when those new episodes come out. Normally they're on Sunday night or Monday, but as I said, we've been catching up. And so we just released one. We're recording tonight on Tuesday. So Jane's one is just released then. And on last one will probably be either tomorrow, Wednesday, or Thursday. So a little bit different. You'll know that by either following us on where you listen to your podcast or checking out Instagram.
Yep. I always make a nice, beautiful, artistic post to tell everybody when the podcast has dropped. So please go, view, make me feel better. Make me feel like I'm not just posting into the abyss.
Yep. Make us feel alive in our podcast. So, I guess I'm just going to jump right in. Where we left off, I had talked about how Bonnie and Clyde really hadn't been tested yet by any organized, law enforcement. At this point, it had been all just kind of local officials. Nothing had been, proactive. It was always just on the chase after a crime had been committed. Nothing was set up to target them or anything like that.
And we talked about, I know, crossing state lines made it difficult, that sort of once they got out of one state, they were, not that they were completely home free, but basically.
In a way, yeah. So I'm going to pick back up. We are in July. Let's see what else, anything else I wanted to say. At this point, again, they're kind of feeling really the sense of invulnerability and feeling pretty good, despite some not so great things happening, like Bonnie's leg getting
completely obliterated.
Yeah, horrifically burnt by battery acid.
Yeah, Can she even walk on her own, or is it really just her getting lifted?
She really can't because she can't straighten her leg fully. So you'll see maybe one of the ones we'll post on Instagram. In a lot of the last photos of her, you won't see her second leg. You'll see her kind of leg is lifted if you're looking carefully.
Yeah.
We're picking up in July. So in July, this time while we're back in Missouri, bad things keep happening in Missouri to them. Seriously.
Yeah.
Again, that was where Joplin.
Joplin. Yeah. That's also where Matt was born, in Missouri. So
also a bad thing.
Yeah. No, we love Missouri for that sole reason. Missouri brought Matt into our lives.
And the Joplin escape, which left 2 lawmen dead, also brought about some of those famous photographs of Bonnie and Clyde. Not that I'm saying that the police, that like the lives are equal to the photos, but it did bring in, I think, a new side of Bonnie and Clyde that we wouldn't have historically without WD's photographs.
Yeah, I do wonder how famous they would be if we didn't have those photographs. I think obviously they'd still be to an extent, but I think that's such a huge part of their story, just to be able to see them and all that.
Yeah, see them kind of in all their quote unquote glamour. It definitely makes it a more engaging story, one that people, I think, connected with. These young, good looking people. It very much felt like Hollywood.
Like the visual medium that we talked about in the second part about the intersection between like film and them, and then obviously also being in the newspapers.
Yeah, and especially during the Great Depression when there's not a lot of things to be excited about. It's this exciting thing. And remember, we also noted how a lot of people felt, I guess, an affinity with Bonnie and Clyde because they were sticking it to the government, to the lawmen, to the banks. And I think they had way more support than if it happened, obviously, at a different time in history. So back to July in Platte City, Missouri. They're staying again in a motor court. Remember, those are those like one little cabin that you can stay in
for $1, like $1 a day.
Yeah, so it's very cheap, but it has indoor plumbing, beds. Before there were big hotels, this was a really good option for people who are on the road.
Hey, I would stay there for $1.
Yeah. Oh, and I did look up because I know we had talked about how in the last episode, a lot of their loot was around $100. And I looked up kind of what that would translate to.
Oh, nice.
Then it was about $2,000.
Yeah, that's
so like a decent haul, obviously, but nothing to write home about. And when we saw the 2 men who were expecting 6 figures in 1930s money, like that's not anywhere near.
And
that.
Especially if you're splitting it between people, that's going to go really quick.
They're staying in the motor court. And of course, Bonnie and Clyde, Blanche, Buck, remember being Clyde's brother, and the fifth wheel, WD.
The baby, the teenager.
Yeah, he's still a teenager. I think he's still 16 at this point, maybe 17, but again, not old at all. He hasn't, not even old enough really to graduate.
He's still in high school. Go back to high school, WD. Get your degree.
Yeah. Seriously. As they're staying in this motor court, they immediately came under suspicion. Well, one, again, they're in Missouri, where we already talked about one of their more big crimes happened. So people are on the lookout for them. And this time, Missouri Highway Patrolman, Captain William Baxter, and Platte County Sheriff Holt Coffey were looped in that it might be the Barrow Gang. For once, the lawmen actually knew who they were potentially up against. Previously, it had been like they thought they were bootleggers or they thought they had stole a car. And so they were really caught off guard.
Now they have a suspicion this might be them.
Right. So knowing the manpower and the violence that they're up against, they actually go to Kansas City and they go to the chief there in Kansas City, and they borrow bulletproof shields, machine guns, and an armored car.
So they are decked out. They are ready to go.
Exactly. I remember in these previous towns, they're up against little small town cops with pistols.
Yeah.
Now they have machine gun, armored car. Can't get kind of more prepared than that.
Yeah, that's about as crazy as you can get in terms of arming yourself at that time. So they are not taking this lightly, that's for sure.
No. Yeah, they know who they're up against. Blanche had actually walked into town to get more bandages for Bonnie. Again, she's still healing. And Blanche noted that the people at the store were kind of acting strangely. The book Go Down Together, I know I keep mentioning it. That's one of my main sources. But they were acting a little off. She noted that when she came back.
Okay.
They actually send in WD to go back later that night back to the store to basically see if he got the same vibe. But he didn't notice anything off. Which I'm like, teenage boy.
Yeah, he's oblivious. He was probably checking out a girl behind the counter or something.
Right. He's like, nope, everything's
good.
Fine.
The vibes are good. The vibes are good.
They all go to sleep. And around 1 a.m., back served coffee. A total of 13 lawmen were ready. They close around one of the cabins. So they had 2 cabins. Buck and Blanche are in the other one. Bonnie and Clyde and WD are in the other, the one that's being surrounded.
Yeah.
And the headlights go through the windows, and that obviously awakens Clyde and WD. Bonnie, remember, is still not doing well at all.
That's kind of horrifying for her because she can't really do anything. She can't move. So she's sort of like a sitting duck.
Exactly. So the Barrow gang starts shooting. Really, it's Clyde and WD, although Buck does get in on the action. Getting into the car, Clyde and WD see the armored car blocking the way, which, like, oh, fuck. But they just smashed right into it. But now they had to get the others into the car, right? If they drove off, the others were...
Yeah, then you're leaving them.
Right. So as Buck and Blanche ran for the car, Buck was actually shot in the temple by a machine gun bullet. So Blanche, along with Clyde, managed to get him in the back of the car. Bullets were smashing through the car, and this one always...
Yeah, I know it's coming next.
Yeah, this part always gets to me. And Blanche was covering Buck's body. The back window explodes, and glass splinters flew straight into Blanche's eyes.
For some reason, I thought like she was shot through the eye, but I guess then she would have died if she had been shot through the eye. But that's the one thing when we talked in the last one about Blanche and Buck. That was the one thing I remembered from the movie was something about her eyes.
Yeah, a bunch of glass splinters. She's like, I can't see. I
can't possibly think of anything more horrifying. I don't know. There's something about your eyes that, like, anything near them.
Well, and thinking of like all these just glass
don't,
splinters.
don't. I'm going to puke.
I know. They try to take them out later, and that's not successful.
I'm assuming she loses the eye, I think. Yes, I would assume.
Well, when they get out into the back country, she can see light and movement, but not very clearly. I'll talk more here.
Okay.
But they do manage to get everybody in the car.
Which is crazy, considering it's 13, what you said, 13 authorities versus there's just a handful of them. And Bonnie doesn't really count because she can't do much. I guess she can shoot, but she can't move on her own, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, but they managed to get away. Buck was still alive, but barely. He tried to calm Blanche down by saying, quote, his head only hurt a little. Now they get to Iowa. They're about west of Des Moines, and they needed to stop, right? Obviously, Buck is in no condition, and Bonnie's really in no condition to keep moving.
And Blanche.
And
don't forget Blanche.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And Blanche has glass in her freaking eye.
Yeah, I cannot forget Blanche. I was trying to forget Blanche.
Sorry.
They need to stop, and they actually came across a park that had once been like a park, like more like, I don't want to say theme park, but had carnival rides. It had a dance hall and a swimming pool. But of course, all of that had closed during early 1933, during the Depression. Nobody had money for that. It was a deserted space where they could set up camp. Clyde pulled off and they camped. They took the seats out of the car and made a makeshift bed for Buck.
Mm-hmm.
Clyde and WD actually had dug a grave for Buck when they first got to the park.
But Buck's like, "What you doing?" "Oh, we're just digging. We thought maybe a time capsule over here or something." "Is that a grave?" No.
Just some exercise, just some digging. But Buck is still alive, although no one thought that he was going to survive for long.
Yeah.
So they weren't under any illusion that he was going to survive his wounds.
Well, even if they got him to a doctor, it would be unlikely that he would survive, but especially if he's not going to a doctor.
Right. I mean, he's shot in the temple by a machine gun bullet. Bonnie and Clyde go into town to get more supplies. WD stayed back with Blanche and Buck, and WD now is, I guess, kind of reached his breaking point, and he's talking nonstop about wanting to leave the outlaw life.
Well,
at this point,
that would do it. This guy has a bullet in his temple. This girl has shards of glass in her eyes. I think I would be done too.
Yeah, you're sitting around talking to them. I don't want to do this anymore. And he's only, at this point, he's 18, still young. He's like, "Get me out of here."
Yeah.
And then obviously Bonnie is, we know what happened to Bonnie's leg with the battery acid. So none of these people are showing him exactly like.
Yeah, Clyde and WD are really the only ones who sort of, well, no, Clyde also has a injured foot from the prison. WD's the only one who's sort of made it out okay so far.
Yeah, although he was shot earlier.
Oh, and never mind,
everybody's gotten something, yeah.
Yeah.
After a few trips into town, thinking they had not been discovered, it was their plan to return to Texas the next day, both because of Buck and because of WD. So John Love, the town's night marshal, he had actually sold Clyde clothes during one of the earlier trips, and he had a tip about the park. He had heard a tip about some people out in the park. He goes out, and by using binoculars, he was able to confirm that, yes, it was the Barrow Gang. He's smart enough to know, I'm not going to go in there by myself. So calls were sent out to the Des Moines Police, Polk County Sheriff, and the National Guard. Still, at this point, the Barrow Gang thinks they have not been discovered. There's been nothing to tip them off. They don't see any suspicion in town. And Bonnie and Clyde actually go back into town to get some hot dogs to cook for breakfast.
No.
Yum. Glamour. There's the glamour.
Yeah, there's the glamour. I'm going to say I don't think like Carol Lombard or Betty Davis were eating hot dogs for breakfast. I will just say that, Bonnie.
I think that is true. They still didn't notice anything suspicious this time. They made it back to camp, and they were able to sleep while the lawmen planned, again, this time being proactive, a dawn attack. In the morning, WD starts cooking up breakfast, yummy hot dogs. Yep. When he actually heard somebody in the brush, and soon the firing began. Clyde was hit in the arm and across his left cheekbone, kind of just skimmed it. And WD also got superficial wounds to his face. Clyde tried to drive into the men.
Through.
Like mow them down. But he got stuck on a tree stump.
God damn it.
I know.
Or I don't know. I don't know. Why am I siding with Clyde? Okay. Well, he's a protagonist of the story along with Bonnie.
I know. So in a way you're like, oh no. It's a weird feeling. You're like, get out of there.
Yeah. I guess they're the ones breaking the law. Well, we'll talk about it. I'm still kind of sympathetic, at least in some ways.
Right. Everybody got out and they headed toward the river. Buck fell and Blanche stayed with him. Obviously, Blanche is also really not in any shape to.
Yeah, I'm surprised if she can't really see. How is she running and all that?
Exactly. When they're spotted, Buck was shot several times in the body. Eventually, they were driven in for medical attention, Blanche and Buck.
So they were caught. They were caught and taken. Yeah. But they were given medical attention. They weren't denied that.
Yep. They
Okay.
were given medical attention. We'll talk more what happens there. At this point, it's Bonnie, Clyde, and WD. They're in the thick brush. Bonnie got hit in the abdomen, but not seriously, but she was bleeding. And they waded across the river, and somehow the lawmen did see them. One speculation is maybe they were distracted by Buck and Blanche enough to... And then also the brush was thick.
I do wonder, maybe they saw a man and a woman. Did they initially think that Buck and Blanche were Bonnie and Clyde?
They could have potentially, when they saw the bodies down. At this point, Bonnie said she wished she had a gun, and WD said it wouldn't be any use. But she, quote, replied she wanted to use it to kill herself since Clyde was done for and she didn't want to live without him, end quote. So Bonnie's not in a really good headspace.
Yeah, I wouldn't be either. I thought eating hot dogs for breakfast was the worst of it. And now Buck's, I'm assuming, gone for. Blanche is in probably critical condition. WD and Clyde are not doing great. And she not only needs Clyde in an emotional, personal way, but she also needs them in order to move. Without them, she really is screwed.
Mm-hmm. So they end up actually at a farm where in the past farms haven't been bad for them because remember, a lot of farmers were sympathetic, even if they didn't know who they were. But at this time, a lot of times they did.
Like, wink, 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 wink. Oh, you're just people passing through.
Right. They're not ones to pick up the phone and call the police. At this point, government is the last thing they want to get involved with. Obviously, Bonnie, Clyde, and WD need a car because even though the lawmen had lost them for now, they're not very far away.
No, and they're not going to get very far considering all their injuries.
Exactly. They found a 1929 Plymouth in one of the farm buildings, but there was no gas as the farmers couldn't afford it. Again, Great Depression.
Yep.
But the farm owner had told them that he had kerosene, so it would run a bit with the kerosene. That was really their only option. It was later found abandoned as the gang continued to steal cars to outrun the law. And obviously there was blood in there from the injuries.
Yeah.
As an aside, Buck died in the hospital on Saturday, July 29th. Emma Parker was there to lend support to his mother.
That's sweet, knowing that. I know she's not a fan of Clyde and she's not necessarily a fan of the Barrows, so that is good for her.
Yeah, and even then Emma wanted her family's reputation intact, and she said that Bonnie was Clyde's wife.
Well, Bonnie is somebody's wife.
Yeah. I mean, and they're in a way kind of like common law and like
true
in many ways. I'm not going to go much into this about Blanche, but she does lose eyesight in her, I believe, left eye.
Okay.
And she's, of course, interrogated. In fact, J. Edgar Hoover came to Des Moines to try to get her to tell him what she knew.
Oh, man. The big man himself.
Exactly. But there was really nothing she could tell him. Like, they didn't have a plan of where they were going next or anything like that.
Yeah, they really were just kind of flying by the seat of their pants.
Right. So she can confirm things that happened, but she can't be giving them anything useful for the future.
She wouldn't know where they were going at all.
Right. Exactly. She ends up serving 10 years in prison.
Okay.
So not
a
long.
huge amount.
Yep. So she lives beyond that, many years beyond her prison sentence. But back to the gang. They're fleeing west from Iowa, and then they change plans to try to throw off the lawmen. At this point, though, WD tells Bonnie and Clyde the same thing he had admitted earlier to Blanche and Buck. He wanted to go home to his mom.
Oh,
She's kind of like
he needs his mommy.
Yeah, I mean, he's a scared little teenager, which at this point, I totally understood. And actually, Bonnie and Clyde understood.
Okay, so they're not upset.
No, they're not upset. And Clyde essentially gives him a script because obviously he knows that WD is going to get picked up.
Yeah.
On suspicion. And even if he doesn't serve time, they're going to want to know, what does he know? So he, basically coaches WD what to say.
Yeah.
But WD does agree to stay with them until both of them are more healed.
Good for him. He's a good friend. Oh my gosh.
Good friend.
Well, he really could just bail and then they would be on their own, and that would be really difficult considering Clyde's not 100% either.
Yeah, he's in the best shape out of all of them. In September, they finally made it home to Dallas. So again, a few months had gone by.
Mm-hmm.
The families were shocked by the sight of Bonnie. Quote, her body was skeletal and she couldn't walk at all, end quote. And this time kind of roles are reversed. Instead of giving gifts, this time they had to ask for items like pillows, blankets, bandages.
Mm-hmm.
Because they obviously...
Yeah, I can't imagine they weren't robbing anywhere on their way back. Their only thing was to heal up and get home. They weren't in any shape to rob anywhere.
Exactly. So they're really living, like, barely scraping by.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, at this point, they also are going to have to stay close to West Dallas after that. Both because, again, they're family. We always know they have that family connection.
Yeah.
And now with WD gone, and Bonnie can't be the getaway driver anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That was her role. So Clyde doesn't have anybody. He needs more gang members to help.
So they are still, well, I guess we know that I was going to say, so they're still going to continue this life of crime, but I guess they really don't have any choice at this point in time. No. Even if they go somewhere to hide out, they're going to need money, food, all that stuff.
Exactly. And the next month, October, was, I would say, even rougher. So Billie Jean, remember, that's Bonnie's sister.
Mm-hmm.
She had a 2-year-old daughter, and her 2-year-old daughter and her 4-year-old son both died in October, most likely from typhoid. Connection to typhoid. Mary, remember, in poor areas.
We can't blame Mary.
No, but we know that disease in the more modern time hits areas that are like slums.
Yeah.
Or pneumonia. So they don't know. Bonnie was really hit hard by this. Obviously, she didn't have any kids, but she was very close to them.
Yeah, she loved kids and she couldn't have kids.
Yeah, and that month that she was there, she was, spending a lot of time with her family.
Yeah.
So after their deaths, quote, she began drinking heavily again, and this caused her appearance to deteriorate further. At just 23, Bonnie no longer looked cute or even young, end quote.
Mm-hmm.
Which, if you look at pictures of her towards the end, you can definitely tell that life on the run has not been kind to her.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to say that in a mean way, but the fact that...
No, we know that stress and then injuries, all that does a number on your body and on your looks, on your appearance.
Right. Emma still is trying to convince Bonnie to leave. This time she's using Blanche as an example. Like, see, Blanche got 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Not bad. Now Emma and Billie Jean didn't even try to hide the fact that they were trying to get Bonnie to leave from the Barrows. And the Barrows pretty much understood. Like, they weren't mad at Emma and Billie Jean. But still, Bonnie's still insistent that she wanted to die with Clyde and be, quote, buried side by side together for eternity.
Can I ask, quote, Blanche wasn't involved I don't know if she was involved in any of the murders or at least limited.
Yes, she was there in Joplin. I mean, she could be tied to Joplin.
But Bonnie could be tied to more of them. So
yeah, so she most likely would have gotten more time.
Than 10 years.
Yeah, but they thought, again, that the jury might be sympathetic due to her injuries.
Yeah.
That she can kind of play up some of those pieces.
She certainly wouldn't flip on Clyde, but her injuries and then just general sexism that people would find it difficult to think that a woman could murder anybody.
Right. That she's certainly not.
She doesn't look dangerous. She doesn't look dangerous
Right.
at that point.
She's not the one calling any shots, that she's just swept away again by love or things like that. So we're gonna have another blast from the past from part one for sure. I don't know if he was mentioned in part two. So on one of their visits back to Dallas, Clyde got a message from Raymond Hamilton's brother. Remember, Raymond was originally in the gang.
Yeah, the gentleman robber.
I was going to say the gentleman bank robber. He's like, I'm better than you guys. Anyway, his brother wanted to work together to talk about breaking Raymond out of Eastham Prison Farm. And I'm not going to talk too much about it, but it actually happened. So Clyde, along with Raymond Hamilton's brother, and some other men, especially some who are on the inside helping as well. Clyde finally was able to fulfill that long-held dream of breaking into Eastham Farm Prison.
Aim for the stars, guys. You too can accomplish your dreams.
Right. And remember, it was this whole thing of, it had been said it was impenetrable. And so now they had broken out some prisoners. So obviously Raymond's out. And there's also, unexpectedly, 3 new passengers. So they weren't expecting. One notable one to keep in mind is going to be Henry Methvin. He's a young Louisiana man who is serving time for attempted murder and car theft. So as I said, these were 3 passengers who were not expected to be coming out with the break-in. They just managed to come out with
hop-ons.
Right.
Hop-ons, which from Arrested Development.
Yeah. Which is tough because the car is not very big. So all 7 of them managed to cram into the car.
It's a clown car. It's a clown car at that point.
Yes, exactly. And they got away. Lee Simmons, who was the prison general manager, of course, was beyond angry, knowing he was just laser focused on the idea that the entire thing was orchestrated by Clyde. Even though we know, as I said, Raymond Hamilton's brother was involved as well. He's just stewing, right?
Well, to be fair, it was Clyde's dream.
Yep. So driving around and robbing small-time businesses was one thing, but it was completely another thing to raid Texas's most secure prison.
Yeah.
He felt humiliated, and he knew that the only way to capture Clyde was to create a posse, a group that could track Clyde and his gang instead of waiting. As I said, being proactive, like setting up a trap. And he only had one person in mind for the job, Frank Hamer. Quote, the only lawman in Texas who was as famous and as deadly as America's most notorious criminal couple, end quote.
Yeehaw. Yeehaw.
Yeehaw. Yeah, pretty much. Hamer was actually a Texas Ranger, and they were a group who had a controversial reputation because they were known for their violent methods. Hamer, out of everybody, was probably the most well-known. Quote, everybody in Texas talked about him, end quote.
Okay.
There were so many stories and legends about him. But I do want to share this one that was discussed in the book, Go Down Together, because I guess it shows that not all... I don't want to stand up for the lawmen, but like, when you hear Texas...
Jamie's pro.
No, I'm not. Yeah,
pro.
I'm not. No. But this one story that was shared was a black man had been accused of raping a white woman, and soon a mob had surrounded the jail, and Hamer came into town, and he walked up to these potential lynchers who were yelling at him, you either move or be lynched himself. And Hamer was known, shockingly, for wearing these Western boots with pointed toes. And he warned everybody to clear the area. And when they didn't, he just started kicking people in the shins with his boots.
Okay, I do kind of love him. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, I'm getting sold. I'm won over.
So soon the crowd had dispersed. So he prevented this potential lynching. And I'm kind of a Hamer fan now. I don't know how I feel.
I'm
I don't know.
Hamer. It's Hamer, right?
Yep.
I'm a Hamer fanatic.
Yeah, I don't know how to feel. I'm not usually, especially in this scenario, like, go cops. He was with the Rangers on and off, basically depending on who was governor at the time, because I'll talk about it in a minute, one of the governors who he hated. And basically no one was going to turn him down when he asked to return. So if he left, he left. And then when he asked to return, they're not going to be like, no, we don't want your services.
Come on back.
So when Lee Simmons, again, the head guy at the prison, came to Hamer in February 1934, Hamer at the time was a civilian. He wasn't part of the Texas Rangers. He completely despised Ma Ferguson, who was the governor, and he resigned basically before she could fire him. So feeling was mutual. So when Lee Simmons met with Hamer first declined as the job only paid $180 a month, which again, we already talked about $100 being about $2,000. So he was just kind of like, it's not really worth my time.
Give me a better deal.
Yeah, and he was in this almost retirement state. He was, on the older side. But Simmons had an idea. He told Hamer that he could take whatever personal possessions from Bonnie and Clyde once they were cornered. He assured them that, quote, I want you to put them on the spot and shoot everyone in sight, end quote.
Wow.
So even though it would most likely take a long time, Simmons promised Hamer that they would back him no matter how long it took. So he's like, we are going to continue to pay you. We're on your side. Like, you can take 6 months. We don't have a time limit. And so Hamer said, well, if that's the way you feel about it, I'll take the job, end quote. So this new gang of 7, again, with
Clown car.
The one to keep in mind is we have Raymond again, and we have Henry Methvin. The new gang, they were able to actually have 2 successful heists, one in Iowa and Oklahoma. At this point, one of the men we haven't talked about, Palmer, he decides to take a temporary break. So now it's down to Clyde, Bonnie, Raymond, and Henry Methvin. So there's 4 of them left at this point. They staged another bank robbery in Iowa, and then they headed south to Louisiana so Henry could see his family. And Clyde really seemed to like and trust 22-year-old Henry. So he's around the same age. So he's a young guy. They said he was really built, obviously, from his time at Easton Prison Farm, like doing all that manual labor.
Yeah, that is the one upside of all that manual labor. You're jacked.
Right. And remember, Clyde is a small man.
Yeah.
So in comparison, Henry Methvin is like a big man. And Henry also, though, seemed to listen to Clyde and accept him as a leader. It wasn't like he was trying to, overtake him or anything like that as like leader of the gang. Now, Raymond at this time had brought his new girlfriend, Mary, into the gang.
Ooh, another girl.
No one liked her. No one liked Mary.
Oh, no. Why? What was the matter with her?
I don't even remember. You'll hear in kind of one instance here.
Okay.
She's
why is everybody anti-Mary?
Anyway, she's kind of obnoxious, which you'll hear in the story. So Bonnie and Clyde, as I'd said before, they were pretty volatile. So they still fought. And during a big blowout fight where they were just both blowing off steam, going separate ways, Mary told Bonnie that they could give Clyde some drugs to knock him out and they could start their own gang.
What? No.
What do you think Bonnie's going to do?
Smack her? Smack her upside the head?
Of course, Bonnie is always going to be loyal to Clyde, even when they're fighting. So, of course, Bonnie told Clyde. And so now Raymond and Mary are out.
Okay.
So now they're back down to 3 members.
Okay. And keep whittling it down.
Bonnie, Clyde, yep. Keeps happening. And so when Henry suggested visiting home again in Louisiana, Bonnie and Clyde were really happy to oblige. Hamer, meanwhile, was following Clyde's driving pattern, starting to figure things out. seemed to see this pattern. He knew eventually he could corner them, but he really wanted to avoid a shootout. Gunning them down was just a whole other thing. And Hamer actually had problems with shooting a woman, the thought of killing a woman, even if he had no respect for Bonnie.
Yeah.
He referred to her as a female dog in heat.
Okay, never mind. Now I take back that Hamer fanatics. I'm taking off my Hamer hat. I was going to say we're going to make merch, but we're not making merch anymore.
Nope. And like many lawmen at the time, he was convinced that any woman who ran with outlaws was clearly promiscuous.
He's certainly not the only one who would be thinking that, but still.
No.
Ew. I also think it's ironic that he's trying to avoid a shootout, knowing what we know.
Well, the problem, too, is that he knows he can't get them apart. Like, getting them apart is going to be nearly impossible. So even though he does not want to kill a woman,
he's going to have to.
Bonnie and Clyde aren't, like, really ever apart.
He's like, well, even if I don't want to, I guess I'm just going to have to suck it up and do it.
I know. And things changed majorly in March when Ivy Methvin, who's Henry's father, he actually contacts Hamer.
Turncoat.
As he's willing to set a trap.
Turncoat.
Why do you think he would reach out to Hamer?
I'm assuming he's going to do a trade-off because his son's the third wheel. So It's like, you get my son off. I'm assuming they're going to time it so that Henry's not involved in the shootout, and then he gets like immunity or something.
Yep, pretty much exactly that. So first of all, let's talk about Ivy and his wife Ava. So let's just say Ivy and Ava were very disliked in their area. They lived in the backwoods in Louisiana, and they were described as nasty, drunk, etc. Ivy actually had a decent amount of money before the Depression, but like most, he had lost it, and now he was old and pretty much willing to do whatever. Ivy and Ava were obsessed with trying to get Henry out of prison. So when he ran off with Clyde and Bonnie, they were convinced that, quote, Bonnie and Clyde were messing up his life, end quote. Even though, as we had heard, he was already in prison for attempted murder.
Ivy and Ava, baby. He doesn't need help messing up his life. He's messed it up all by himself.
Right. Yeah.
This was ultimate, like, boy, mom, my son could do no wrong.
Right. They are the one who are corrupting and messing up his life. Like, well, your son escaped from prison. So, So Ava and Ivy said they would help, of course, for a complete pardon for Henry.
Okay.
The deal was made. And then this event, Grapevine, which I'm going to talk about, happened on Easter Sunday. What happened was there were 3 motorcycle officers from the Texas State Highway Patrol. They caught on to this flashy car. Clyde, stop stealing flashy cars.
Yeah, he leaves his meds with his name on in the cars, and he always gets the flashiest car. Like, come on, dude.
Right. So they're in Grapevine, Texas. The motorcycles decide to follow them for just a routine check. Clyde saw them approaching, and he was ready for what he normally did. What was normal in those situations.
Yeah, where they took them, kidnapped them, used them as hostages, and then dumped them somewhere.
Exactly. He was set up for a typical kidnapping like they had done before. So here's where things get dicey. He says to Henry, let's take them. But remember, Henry was new to this. He was new to the gang. So he took it as taking them down, as in shooting them. And so they shot at them. And Murphy, one of the men, actually died. And it was, okay, here's 2 really bad things for Bonnie and Clyde for the media attention. It was Murphy's first day on the job, and he's about to get married.
Oh, no.
his fiance went to his funeral in her wedding dress.
I mean, bravo. I mean, girl, I got to give it up to her. I don't want to say she's playing that up because, I mean, poor her. Her fiance just died, so I do feel for the woman. But, whew,
Yeah.
that bad press. Even if people were inclined to sympathize with Bonnie and Clyde, now that's kind of running out.
Mm-hmm. And one of the surviving officers had actually said it had been a man and a woman who had shot Murphy. Which, again, we don't know for sure, but Bonnie really didn't like handling guns, so most likely it wasn't.
Yeah.
She was there, but again, we don't know whether he was lying or...
In my mind, they're the famous ones. Who cares about Henry? Nobody cares about him. You talked about in the second part about people embellishing the stories as they encountered them, saying that Bonnie did this. So I think that I feel like this is the same.
Yeah. And so before, of course, she had been this femme fatale, like, this really sexy woman in the press.
Mm-hmm.
And now she was a killer. So a quote from Go Down Together, quote, much of the public now believes she was every bit as vicious as Clyde Barrow, end quote. So she wouldn't be like Blanche anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So, and even if she turned herself in, she's not going to get that sympathy because of public image.
Yeah, that's gone.
Right. Well, another day, another gun battle with small town cops. Another one was killed. Another one kidnapped. And by mid-April, Marie, remember Clyde's sister, noted that Bonnie and Clyde had finally caught on that they were being tracked by Hamer.
Oh, so now they know. They know.
Right. They know that it's happening. They met with their families a few times over the next few weeks. And then they went down to Louisiana to visit Henry's family.
No.
Yeah. Hamer now is planning an ambush, one where Ivy was actually directly involved. And actually, Ivy, remember Henry's father, he didn't want that. He was like, no, Clyde's too smart. Like, I don't want to be actually part, like, in the plan.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I gave you the information, but I don't want to be part of the plan.
Okay.
But they basically said to him he had to be involved or no pardon.
Wow. Ouch. Well, earn that pardon. Earn that money, babe.
Now, of course, though, the lawman needed a place and a time. So back to the gang. They rob a bank on their way to Louisiana in Iowa on May 3rd. And as I said, they continued to head down to Louisiana, but they do stop in Texas one more time. At that trip, Bonnie asked Emma that she be brought home, not to a funeral parlor after her death. So she already had a whole plan. And Bonnie made Emma swear to never say anything bad about Clyde. Bonnie also gave her mom a poem called The End of the Line, which later is known as The Story of Bonnie and Clyde.
Mm-hmm.
As the book Go Down Together said, she wasn't a gifted poet. A little overblown imagery. Everything's kind of cramped in.
She's young.
Yeah. But this poem is very famous because the last stanza reads, quote, someday they'll go down together and they'll bury them side by side. To a few, it'll be grief. To the law, a relief. But it's death for Bonnie and Clyde. End quote.
And they say she's a bad poet. I think that's good.
That's obviously one of the most well-known pieces. And obviously the inspiration for the book Go Down Together.
Yeah.
Okay, so they reach Louisiana. At this time, remember, only Ivy, Ava, and now Henry know of the setup.
Mm-hmm.
Clyde gave members of Henry's family money. Remember, he's known for his generosity.
Oh my gosh.
And
Ivy, Ava. I know they're not necessarily the bad people. I get why they're doing it. They're doing it for their son, but I don't know. I've got mixed emotions. I'm feeling big things.
Yeah. On May 20th, Henry told his parents about how they were driving into Shreveport the next day. The gang always had a plan that if they were separated, that they would meet back at Henry's parents' house. That was right their meeting spot. While in town, Bonnie and Clyde drove around a block. They thought they were being followed, and at this time, Henry bolts.
Okay. They're not suspicious about this?
Surprisingly, I think
because they thought they were being followed. Yeah.
That they're like, oh, Henry must have gotten scared and
Mhm.
ran off. But they knew they'd meet him back at his parents'. And actually, Henry did meet them one more time after dark. He meets up with them. Meanwhile, the law decided their plan. So the law decided that if Ivy was on the side of the road with his truck all messed up, like broken down, stopped in some way, so Ivy's out there, that Bonnie and Clyde would stop. We know that they liked Henry's parents. And then the timing, based on what Henry had said, is they should be going by at around 9 a.m.
Okay.
So they have a time in mind. So 6 men were on top of a hill ready for the ambush. Ivy was told that when he saw Clyde and Bonnie appear, he should go down the hill to his seemingly broken down truck. So 9 o'clock comes, no car. At 9:15, they suddenly heard a car approaching.
Oh, no.
So Clyde, again, sees the truck. He sees Ivy. He stops behind the truck. And Hamer was ready to call out to give them actually a last chance to surrender.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Remember, Hamer wanted to avoid a shootout. So he was going to give them a last chance to surrender. But before he could, a young deputy, so excited about this opportunity, right? He aimed at Clyde and shot.
Damn it.
No one could see him with the brush. They just heard it, right? So the other officers, so they didn't know if it was coming from Bonnie and Clyde or from him. And so soon the shots rang out. Quote, in those few seconds, Bonnie screamed a high, shrill wail that haunted the men about to kill her for the rest of their lives. Death had always been an abstraction.
Oh, my gosh. That's chilling.
Yeah. At this point, she realizes Clyde is dead next to her. In the movie, he's outside of the car, but in real life, he's in the car.
Yeah, I've seen, you can see photographs, obviously.
Yeah, they actually even have real footage.
Yeah, I haven't seen that, but I've seen unwillingly, just looking at photos for them, but seeing him in the car.
Yeah, they have that. At this point, she realizes Clyde's dead next to her and that she was about to die as well. And in 16 seconds, it was over. Bonnie and Clyde didn't even get to fire a single shot.
Wow.
Of course, as we know, because people suck, soon a crowd gathered around the car. And some people were trying to reach inside the car to grab souvenirs.
Yeah, there's always those souvenirs, especially at this time. And before that, it was like, anytime there'd be any sort of any crime, people would, I don't get it.
I know. Yuck. One man tried to cut off Clyde's ear.
Oh, fuck
and
you.
And another, his trigger finger. Someone got a part of Bonnie's hair and some got a piece of her dress.
Yeah.
And as you said, news photographers snapped pictures of Clyde and Bonnie in the car, and then also actually had their remains on the coroner table.
Yeah,
so
I've seen that too. And this is where we will judge Bonnie here shortly. You know, she'll get her judgment and her due, but this I have really bad feelings.
I know.
No matter what you think, they're humans. They have families that love them. Yeah. Obviously, there's going to be usually pictures for the autopsy and things like this, but this is,
this is for public consumption. Yeah, and even worse, somehow another cameraman had gotten into the room and he took photos of their naked bodies.
Yeah,
when they were on the table.
That's not okay. Not okay. No matter who's on there, not okay.
Yeah. Hamer does decide to let the public come in and view their bodies.
Okay, another strike against him.
Clyde was buried with his brother Buck. Emma had Bonnie dressed in a pretty blue dress with a white veil covering her face to hide the wounds. If you can see them, obviously they were shot up by machine guns, so a lot of obvious wounds. Emma Parker did, though, boycott Clyde's services, so she didn't go to Clyde's services.
Mm.
The end of the book, Go Down Together, ends with a quote from Blanche Barrow, and I kind of wanted to end with that, too, before we do our judgment. Mm-hmm. She said, quote, "People only live happily ever after in fairy tales," end quote.
Ooh, yeah. That's heavy. This last part is brutal in every sense of the word. I mean, brutal to the bodies, brutal in the aftermath of their deaths. This is hard.
Yeah. Yeah. When you look at the car shot up, like there's just kind of that visceral reaction.
Again, no matter what you think of them, and I know a lot of people they are criminals. They did kill people. They were involved in crime. So you can hold that, but also say it's not okay that people are displaying their naked bodies, that photographs are taken of them when they're dead. They don't have any consent over that. You can hold those two together.
Right. Now comes, of course, our judgment of Bonnie Parker.
Babe, you go first. I'm really curious because you've obviously you've been with Bonnie for a long time.
I know. I think, and that's the problem. The longer I sit with people, I become, I'm a people person.
Yeah.
Even last night, I kept going back and forth and thinking about it.
This is really hard. Because then also she linked herself with Clyde in life and death. She is so linked with him. So it's hard to even pull her apart from him and his actions.
Right. I know. And I think that's the thing that gives me a different number than I think I would. If I was judging them as a pair, it would be different than, or if I was judging Clyde, it would be a different number. I would give Clyde a lower number. Even though I wouldn't say 100% villain, but I would give him a lower number than Bonnie. So what I'm going with this,
I have no idea. Like sometimes I kind of know where you're going, and I have no idea.
I'm going to go 60% positive, 40% negative.
Ooh, okay. Actually, I was kind of settling on that too.
Yeah.
I was going to say, why do we always end up similar? It's because we're twins.
Yep, twinsies. So my reasons, I think a lot has to play with the time period. I think if it wasn't the Great Depression, if Bonnie was not a woman who had been born into the slums in West Dallas, and then the Great Depression hits, her life could have looked really different.
It's not like she was dreaming of being like a madam, a woman of crime from the very beginning.
Yeah. Obviously, she liked the attention and was drawn in a way. That's, again, why she chose it. It was like, I can either have this boring life in the slums where I'm going to be in the cycle of poverty, or I can have this short but exciting, adventurous life.
Yeah.
And it's not that, again, I want to give her all these kudos for being a good student and for all of those, but she was, she wanted to be an actress. It seemed like she was generally well liked, but she was tough, obviously. She had to be tough because she grew up poor. So she stood up for herself. She obviously made some bad decisions early on, but she was young. For example, like getting married young to Ray.
Yeah.
Or Roy. Sorry, not Roy.
Well, doesn't matter. We don't care about him anyway.
Right. But as the book had said, that was pretty much what girls did. Even if she had graduated,
Mm-hmm.
like she wasn't going to college. There was no money for that. That wasn't even an option. So getting married made sense, especially because we know she wanted to be a mother. And I think then, of course, her working as a waitress, we see the side of her by giving homeless men meals and almost getting fired over it, which
Yeah.
at that time period.
I love that. I think that gives you a lot of insight into her, that she's able to do that and then to do it when she needed the job. It's not like she didn't have to have that job. So she against getting fired for it.
Right.
To do those.
Yeah. And the hard part, of course, is when she gets linked with Clyde.
Yeah.
It's, it is an obsession, an obsessive kind of love. There's obviously some very unhealthy elements of it.
Mm-hmm.
Although there's also, Clyde did a lot for her when she was injured. He literally could have let her stay and die.
There's obviously that toxic undercurrent of it in terms of them. There was domestic violence on both sides, and don't want to romanticize it, but he did also step up when she needed him.
Yeah. And it also, though, gets hard because who they're robbing is actually hard because they're harming not the big banks. They're harming small time businesses and places where people were struggling. So that's where I start to get like,
it would almost be better if they were robbing those bigger banks.
Right. You don't feel sympathy if JP Morgan or, just those big financial institutions are hurt versus a mom and pop shop. But they weren't robbing once things had gotten so bad where they were linked to murders. They knew they had to have a life on the road. Bonnie basically was unwilling to leave Clyde, which again would be a negative, I would say, on her. But who they robbed, I should say, how much they robbed, really was about survival most of the time. I mean, it wasn't about just trying to enrich themselves with as much money as they could. They gave to their families. Obviously, Bonnie had a really close relationship with her family, her mother.
Yeah.
And that relationship was maintained throughout the whole time. When they went to farms, she connected with people socially, with kids. You can see those glimpses of another life that Bonnie could have had.
Yeah, but it's kind of sad. Even her and Clyde, he wanted to open up that shop by his family's repair shop.
Service. Yeah, but again, he needed money, Great Depression. So I think the time period plays a huge part in that.
Oh, 100%. It's like sliding doors. You don't know what it would have been like if it had been earlier or a little bit later.
Right. And so obviously, as I said, she gets some negatives for obviously robbing people who are already struggling and being part of the gang when murders occurred, even though she wasn't pulling the trigger. And even though most of those occurred, I don't want to say by accident, but when basically was like they had no other choice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard because I don't want to give them too much credit for that, but
it's a thin line.
Right. But when they could, a lot of times they kidnapped, right, and held hostage. It wasn't automatically, okay, we're going to pull out the guns right away. I do think you have to give some credence to that. And her vanity, of course, I think played a role, staying because she was in the newsreels and feeling invincible. And she's also 23 years old. So,
so young.
Her brain is not fully formed. I have a really hard time with their ending. even though Hamer again was trying to get them to surrender, and obviously things didn't go down as planned, the viewing of the bodies and that kind of hoopla that kind of has that grossness to it.
It's really hard to get past that. No matter who they are, what they did, nobody deserves that. At least give some dignity in death.
Yeah, I think Bonnie at her core, I think, had a kind heart. She was, I don't want to say and go in that sexist thing of that she was completely destroyed by a man, but I think her love and her dedication and her big heart, like that got her in trouble because she loved so passionately that she couldn't imagine a life without Clyde. So.
Yeah, she really couldn't comprehend at any point that there was an escape route. She did have multiple times her mom tried to get her out and such.
Yeah.
But again, I think that is very much who she was and her being so young, where she's in that deep, passionate love that we all are in your early 20s.
Right. And you're like, no, I'm not going. I've made this decision. I think as we saw, like with her scream at the end, you know, a lot of, well, in like the biography, it's like, even though she knew and she kept saying, we're going to die young, like that realization suddenly when it's actually happening.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. If at that moment she had any regrets. Yeah.
That she probably did. And especially as her body was mangled and she, you know, was not in good shape. I don't know if it was mercy at that point, but
yeah,
it was something. I hold a little bit of that sympathy for that girl who
she just wanted to get out and to be
somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be somebody, get out of the slums, have children and connect with people. The fact that at the farmhouses, they didn't have to give the people money. They gave people money.
Yeah.
I think, that's my take.
I think you covered so many of the points that I would have wanted to make, and you said it so well. It's hard to even, I don't have much more to add. It's just, I know that there's going to be people who listen to it. We're going to say, but they're criminals and they killed people. And I do recognize that, although how involved Bonnie,
right?
Like, yeah, she was there in some cases, but also Clyde did it before she had even officially joined the gang.
Yeah. And she, with the Doyle Johnson murder, was yelling at them to get in the car.
Yeah.
Like, there were moments that she was trying to avoid the violence. I would give Clyde, like I said, a different score.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go into that.
I think you can understand, again, you can cover some of the points that are similar to Bonnie, that he's kind of forced into a life of crime, but I do hold slightly less sympathy for him. Obviously, it was in a poor area, but there were other avenues open for him that were not for Bonnie.
Yes.
I pretty much would go to the same 60-40 for a lot of the same reasons that you said. It's hard for me, her being so young, not to have that kernel of sympathy.
Right.
And again, like we talked about, there was a point of no return. So even if I know that she was saying, I want to stay with Clyde, but who knows if in the back of her mind, it really was also, I don't have a choice. There's nothing left for me.
Right. There's nothing for me here.
That's what leads me to feeling my heart hurts for her. I wish that she had been given different circumstances in her life.
Yeah. So it's socioeconomic time period.
But I do. And I do recognize that she was involved in some unsavory and some bad things. That's where the 40% comes from. So people don't say that we're sympathizing with murders and criminals. But you really do wonder, what if they had been born a little bit later, what they could have done with themselves, or if it would have been a similar story.
Exactly. Well, I guess we'll end it there. So that is the end of Bonnie and Clyde, their story. And we are going to pick up back on our regular schedule, our normal posting. Erin has her story next. She already posted an Instagram with a clue.
We're going to space. We're going to space, guys. In my mind, my space perspective is like space camp. I'm going to have to do a Canva Instagram post of putting us in Space Camp, the movie, with a Jinx robot.
I was going to say, are we putting Jinx on trial for launching them into space?
Tammy, that should be our Patreon episode. That would be a good one.
We're Jinx on trial. Like, can we hold a robot
responsible
for blasting them into space
with no preparation?
Yeah, Max and Jinx friends forever.
I love that. Whenever I think of space, that's like my first go-to. Not the Apollo missions or anything, but
no,
we're going to space, guys. You can check out Instagram if you want even more of a clue.
Yeah. Awesome. So thanks everybody for listening and following along with us on this part 3 and final one for Bonnie and Clyde, or Bonnie, I should say. We know we don't do very many 3-parters, but I thought this one definitely deserved that more storytelling element. So if you are not following us on Instagram or Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts, I would do that. So you get those notifications when we post new stuff, which on Instagram's a lot. And I mean, frankly, lately with our podcasting, a lot of times it's been more than weekly, which
constants
are. Right. And even more content on our Patreon. I'm going to do a short episode, something related with Bonnie and Clyde. I haven't decided what tomorrow for the Patreon page. So those are always an option. As always, if you want to donate, there's Buy Me a Coffee, or again, Patreon's another way to donate and get content.
Yeah. Get that Jinx mini-sode.
Yeah. Can we hold Jinx responsible? I'm going to be thinking about.
I'm going to do my research, which would be rewatching Space Camp.
Yeah, the little notebook.
Shout out to our older sister, Lindsay, who introduced us to Space Camp.
Yep. Thank you, Lindsay. Yeah, so that's it. Good night, everybody. As always, we will be back to judge with you soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Bye, guys.